I'm so excited to chat with you because I have been a fan of INDAY since the very, very, very beginning. I remember the menu was different, the counter was in a different place, but the one thing that has stayed the same is the sign about good karma. The lovely people who have always worked there, they have changed. Some of them have changed over the years, but there's always been this warmth about everyone I've encountered who works at INDAY. And the food. The food is one of my absolute favorite places in New York and anywhere in the world. And when I make it to the city, which is not very often these days, whenever I can find parking, I try to make it there and get a few bowls to myself. And if anything's left for my husband, I share it with him as well. And, it's been quite a journey to witness from the outside all the growth and the changes. And I'm just so excited to sit down with you and see who one of the humans is behind all of that creation. So welcome, and let's get this going.
Thank you for having me today on the show. Likewise, I feel like I've witnessed so much of your growth and spiritual and professional development. And I remember the first time you came in, and you've been such a great supporter and fan, and so helpful for us. And honestly, people like you who really understand the why behind what we do make it all worth it. So I'm excited to chat.
So what is the why behind what you do, and what paths and events in your life led you to doing what you do now? And also, for those who don't know, just give a little overview. What is INDAY? Because years ago it used to be one restaurant, and now it's a whole world of places where people can nourish themselves on different levels.
My name is Basu Ratnam. I grew up here in New York, and I grew up in an Indian American household. And I think like a lot of immigrant families, the rhythm of our life and our sort of family center was really around the dinner table. And it was a place where my mom sort of made sure that we met every evening as a family. And it was hugely important to her that she transmitted kind of the culture and stories of our family through food. And so I grew up with a deep appreciation for the recipes, the power, the healing nature of food. And so it's something that I've kind of always held really close to my heart. And actually 25 years ago, my mom wrote a book called Spirit versus Scalpel.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a textbook that's used in a few different universities all around the world. But the idea was looking at ancient Eastern modalities around wellness and comparing it with kind of modern practice of Western medicine. And so, that in a lot of ways, that thinking and that way of kind of understanding the world has been the foundation for how I thought about my life and the type of career I wanted to build. So INDAY was born from that idea. After college, I was working on the business side of things. I was in finance, and we were buying big companies, and I felt like, there wasn't much of a spiritual connection or an emotional connection between what I was doing and what I ultimately wanted to be building. And INDAY came from kind of an opportunity I saw in the food world as people were starting to care more about what they were putting in their body and understanding the impact that it was having on their kind of physiology and biology, and caring more about the environment that they're eating. But there was an opportunity to tell a story about Indian food that just hasn't been done before. So we opened our first restaurant in 2016. We have 5 more that we've opened. We're opening 3 more next year and starting to expand to new markets, and really feel fortunate to be still running this business.
So how much did you know about food and recipes, menu creation, and all of the pieces that go into running restaurants when you started it?
Very little. I didn't know much, and I think that's like a blessing and a curse, obviously. The restaurant industry is one of the hardest industries in the world, and I think I probably wouldn't have had the courage to go into it if I knew just how much could go wrong. But that's like the joy of youth and inexperience. And I was really fortunate from kind of the day I had the idea to have like a really thoughtful and helpful group of partners and investors who were able to kind of support me in the early days, and we were able to build an extraordinary team of people, many of whom are still with us. And I knew enough to put the pieces together, but I was able to find the right partners to be able to actually, bring something to life.
What have you learned since starting INDAY about finding that balance, that harmony between business practices and spiritual practices, and spiritual lens through which, what inspired you to start these restaurants in the first place?
It's an evolving relationship. I think there are certain times where you're able to do things that really kind of nurture who you are and how you feel about the way you want your life to move forward. And sometimes you have to put a little bit of that to the side and kind of grit your teeth and do whatever it takes to keep the business alive. And I think I'm constantly finding that tension and that balance. And there's days where I feel really connected to the work that we're doing, and I feel really passionate about the change that we're making. And it's been a huge emphasis for me is to incorporate some of the more kind of spiritual underpinnings and emotional underpinnings of Indian culture into the day-to-day of our restaurants. We spend a lot of time with our teams introducing these concepts at very basic levels to try and help them kind of tune in or tap into the energy that they have, because for the most part, the people that work in our restaurants have had very different backgrounds and educations to what I was exposed to as a kid. And a lot of them have this desire to feel better, to feel more connected, to be more in touch to be more in touch with themselves, but they don't often have the vocabulary or the tools to do it. And so a big part of my journey has been being able to incorporate and teach those lessons to our team.
I would love to get more into that. What are some of those specific practices? Because, from someone who's really advanced in mindfulness and spiritual practices to someone who's just starting out, I find that just knowing about them and having read a book about them or having done a course on these things, it doesn't really matter if we're not implementing it daily. So what are some of those starter points, and what are some of the invitations that you're extending to your team? Because they're really applicable to everyone.
Sure. We build around this idea of ritual every day in the restaurants. And so, we have something that's called actually we call it the daily ritual, where the general manager of every store has a 10-minute window that he or she is able to do as they please with their team. And it's a moment for the team to come together, take a pause from the daily activity of the restaurant. It incorporates some version of either like a box breathing or a joint meditation, a silent meditation. Sometimes it's mantra based, and we cycle between a couple of different mindfulness practices. Sometimes we'll do a metta meditation. Sometimes it'll be a silent, more gratitude focused one. But we give the GMs training on these very specific, and it's not super long, 2 to 4 minute tools that they can use. And then, they sit together and they'll do like a quick body scan. They'll set an intention for the day. And then depending on how much time they've left, it's like 3 to 5 minutes. The GMs will talk through kind of daily activities, goals, hopes, or sometimes we just go around the team and they share how they're doing and how they're feeling. So there's a little bit of structure. It's a short part of their day, but we built it in as a non-negotiable sort of starting point for everyone's shift. And it's pretty powerful, actually. Like, we've seen employees who initially were super resistant of doing it, but I think it's something that has created a lot of peace, especially in a very turmoil and very difficult environment. And all of our GMs, they do it religiously now. It's become like a favorite part of their day, and we have multiple employees who ask us for more advanced tools, and we've signed them up for different meditation apps. And it's really been astounding just to see how it's been adopted, and it has proven to me that there's an appetite for people of all walks of life and all stages of the practice to start getting a little bit more mindfulness in their day.
It sounds like this invitation to take people's humanity into account in the workplace, which is 99.9% of the time forgotten. And just even
Totally.
the idea itself to do that, to see people in the fullness of who they are, sounds like such a profound, simple, but forgotten concept.
Yeah, I mean, I have always felt like the restaurant business is a people business, and we have the honor of serving people food that I think we spend a lot of time designing our menus and creating meals that I think are really nourished and balancing and full of great nutritious ingredients and
Confirmed.
you know and we have the it's a pleasure that we get to serve that food every day. And so for me, the base root of the word restaurant is restore, and that's an idea that we take very seriously in our business. And the restaurant business can be very difficult and very grueling, but at the end of the day, our mission is to make it easier for people to feel better, and that starts with our team. And so we feel like anything we do externally can't be done if we don't have a strong foundation, we don't have a sense of connection, and our first core value is empathy. And so we try to build our entire business on the basis of our team connecting with each other first. Well, actually, connecting themselves first and then being able to connect with each other.
What about your personal practices? I read in an interview that you meditate for 30 minutes in the morning and evening. Is that still something you do?
I used to do 20 minutes morning and evening, and I was very religious about it. And I have to be honest that the turmoil of the pandemic has sort of thrown me off practice. I still try to do something every single day, and I need to get back into it. But I find that when I am really committed to the practice, and I can do it 2 times a day, that it has a huge impact on my quality of life and ability to be centered and really sort of be in the moment and connected to what I'm doing, as opposed to sort of being pulled in a million directions and never really focused.
Now, is that something that you get from your family, the meditation practice and all the different practices you do at the restaurants?
My mom, my mom has chanted her whole life, and she's especially increased her practice. She's actually teaching herself Sanskrit now, so she can learn sort of the root Vedic texts in their original form, which I think is incredible. So I would say my curiosity for doing it definitely comes from my mom. But she raised us here, and she raised us in the States, and she wanted us to fit in. And there's a reason why she didn't raise us back home in India. And so she wasn't too strict. We went to the equivalent of an Indian culture school, and we learned a lot of the prayers. We learned a lot of the meditation practices. We learned yoga from a young age, but she really gave us the freedom to pursue it at our leisure after we got to a certain age. So I would say, to answer your question, the base practice came from her, and I guess she made that early imprint in my life. But in terms of how we've inputted it professionally and how we've made that a part of the DNA of our company, has been something I felt compelled to do.
Have you gone back to India?
I've been back a bunch of times. Pre-pandemic, we were going back probably every year or 2 years. But it's been interesting. I think for me, India, it wasn't a place we visited a ton as children. My parents came here, and they both left India to build roots in the U.S. They both of them came here to do their studies, and India was a place at the time where it wasn't as cultivated as a tourist destination as it is now. And so, when they had the opportunity to have us travel, they tried to expose us to the rest of the world. And going back to India has been more of something that I feel personally interested in, because I know at the end of the day, that's what my origin story and my family's history is. And so I go back now with an interest in just sort of understanding that better for myself, as opposed to having like a deep family network.
Thinking about India as I was preparing for the interview, what I got present to is that I've always had spiritual awareness growing up that expressed itself in many ways, from not feeling like I fit in or constantly reading different self-help and psychology books, to just wanting to spend all the time in nature and forage mushrooms and things like that. But I didn't have physical, tangible spiritual awareness until I visited India. Because when I was
Really?
15, my dad, fun fact, he speaks Hindi. He studied it in
Really?
college and spent a bunch of time there. Yeah. And so
That's cool.
it's really funny. You see this super white guy just like talking all fluent
Does he
sounding
still speak
Hindi.
Hindi?
He's probably lost most of it, but if he had to, he would remember it just like he did during our trip. Because when we went there,
Wow.
when I was in high school, it was me, my mom, my dad, and some friends. We traveled to New Delhi, to the Himalayas, Agra, Jaipur, so many beautiful, beautiful places. And I remember there was this tiny, tiny monastery somewhere in the mountains in the Himalayas where I just walked into it and I felt like something just swooped me up and showed me my own aliveness. And it's in that place I just kind of froze.
Wow.
I was amazed. I was like, whoa, what is this? I didn't quite have the words to understand what it was, but I just made myself a promise that I will come back to India and for a long time and I'll study spiritual things. That's the promise I made myself as a 15-year-old. And I did
Have you
actually.
been back?
Yeah.
Oh,
I,
wow.
I went back on a spiritual pilgrimage almost 10 years ago with my teacher, David Wagner, who's also been a guest on the
Wow.
podcast. But he's the one I learned about meditation from, about Ram Dass, and so many things that still impact my life highly. And it was a 10-day journey into some of the holy spots around
Hmm.
Maharashtra. And I
Oh, wow.
definitely, that's where I experienced, I would say, part two of my spiritual awareness, spiritual awakening, where I just felt like I am part of everything, or at least got like a very short glimpse into it. I didn't yet learn how to hold on to it. I'm still learning it, but I got a glimpse into
Yeah.
what's possible. And my life hasn't been the same. It's been really guiding so many of my choices. And that's when I was starting to get into yoga more deeply, did my yoga teacher training, started Breakfast Criminals when a lot of things started taking off on the external, sort of superficial side too. So I'm curious, what are your experiences going to India? Because, your restaurants, they do pay such respect to India with the traditions and rituals and the recipes in a modern way. What's your personal relationship, and what are some of the experiences or stories you can share from your trips?
India is obviously a huge culinary inspiration for us, and it's really special to be able to go there and see kind of at the root, where the food comes from, how it was designed. And I think one thing that's really powerful is just sort of the idea of Ayurvedic cuisine and Ayurvedic food, and the whole system was really developed to be intuitive, to be based on um, what the land can provide, and a real deep sense of kind of the biodynamic environment of growing food and preparing food. And I think that's you see that a lot in India, and it's interesting. I think they're just now really taking it seriously. It used to be that when you would go back to India and you wanted to eat healthy food, they would serve you like the Mediterranean diet.
Mm,
They were so focused on sort of the Western conception of what healthy means. And I think now that there's been a pull from this side of the world in terms of really understanding these things that were kind of relegated to ashrams and monasteries and places that were a little bit outside the city centers. Now you're seeing it being taken more seriously. And so there's been a few times when I've been back to India, I've gotten to see these more biodynamic farms that are cultivated in a more like in an Ayurvedic practice with the intention of building kind of more elevated food. And it's been fascinating. India is an incredibly stimulating place. And the closer you get to the root source of a lot of these places where the spices are grown, and you understand sort of the activation that takes place when these specific ingredients are combined, it's really powerful, and it's been some of the most like profound food experiences that I've been able to have.
how much of the menu that you build is guided by Ayurveda?
It's interesting. It's something that I pay attention to, and I have cycled in and out of being very um, structured around it. I mean, we there are certain principles of Ayurveda that I find to be very helpful in terms of thinking about seasonality, eating for warming seasons versus cooling seasons, thinking about grounding ingredients, creating composed and balanced bowls. But there are pieces of Ayurveda that I think can also be limiting, especially for the Western palate. And we try to create balanced meals that have all the tastes, that have the different components of what creates, a wholesome and nutritious setting. But I would say it's a combination of kind of modern science and what we know to be true from like a Western kind of macrobiotic consideration and the more sort of traditional Eastern Ayurvedic philosophies.
I think one of the most popular things or dishes people know about Ayurveda is Kitchery. It's something that is a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of my
Totally.
life. I eat it all the time. And one of the things that kept bringing me back to INDAY over and over again was your karma cup, which was a
Mm-hmm.
cup of Kitchery that if you buy, one gets donated. I think it was to the Bowery or to,
Yeah, so the Bowery Mission. That's a
right.
good memory.
Oh my gosh, I would never forget that. So, personal question, is Kitchery ever coming back?
For
And
sure, 100%.
all right. Tell me more.
Yeah, there's a few things that we stopped doing just because, I think as a part of, we were trying to find our feet in some ways, and it's something that's a dish and a concept that is like incredibly true to who we are. And we felt like there was a certain point in which we didn't have the resources to do it properly. But that's something that when we get back into full swing, I love the idea of it. It was inspired very much by gurdwaras in India, which are Sikh temples. There's a whole concept that anyone in the world can go to a Sikh temple and they'll feed you. And it's usually a very simple dish that's based on rice and lentils, similar to Kitchery. And it's a really beautiful concept and idea. And I think that idea of paying it forward and creating just a meal that is nourishing and rejuvenating, but also, provides sustenance for another person is just a really beautiful concept. And so it's something we'll definitely be bringing back.
You've also nailed chai and Bon Broth.
Yes.
It,
We worked really hard on those two things.
they are absolutely incredible.
I really appreciate you saying that
Yes.
because it's been a lot of both those things are a labor of love.
And you can taste it. How much?
But like for example, broth is a good example. Like broth has no, you know, I find it to be one of the most sustaining, healthful, like nourishing foods that have so many healing properties to it, but isn't something you see in traditional Ayurvedic philosophy. And so I don't want to say we pick and choose and we're opportunistic, but it's our philosophy isn't strictly Ayurvedic for things like bone broth. Like we think it's a really important foundational part of the diet, and so it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Do you feel like with INDAY you are living your soul's purpose or aligning with it or moving towards aligning with it?
Yeah, I think most of the time I feel like I don't have a job. I feel like I have a purpose, and it is by far the most gratifying work I've ever done. I was in a conference earlier this week in Denver, and we had just opened a store, a new restaurant, our fifth location in the financial district, and we had a manager that had never been a manager before with us and had come up as a cook and had been with us for a few years. And I got a video of him leading a meditation, and he started with sort of practicing loving kindness, and it was like just like so heartwarming to see this kid who before he started with us had never even uttered those words, and just to feel so deeply to choose to lead that meditation and the bravery that takes to be a first time manager of a store and be a young person early in his career, and just I don't know. So there's moments like that make me feel like what we're doing is really special, and I feel like we're having a positive impact on people's lives, and I think we're building better humans, and yeah, that feels very aligned with what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is the new era, the new paradigm of businesses is not just about what the company serves the customer, but it's also the internal relationships. It's where you source from. It's kind of this invitation to become more conscious on every step with every single being involved. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm hearing from you with what you're doing with, I know, you source very mindfully, the recipes, the giving the love to the culture that, you're inspired by, and being empowerers, is that a word? Empowering your employees.
I've said this for a long time. I think that this idea of wellness or well-being needs to be a very inclusive principle. The foundation of a lot of these practices, whether it's meditation and mindfulness or Ayurvedic philosophy and this idea of food as medicine or integrative medicine, these things were all developed to be cost effective, to be easy to understand, to be accessible to people. And I think the way that it's been co-opted in the US has made it so that it feels very expensive and elitist and out of touch with how the average person is living. And so a big part of what we try to do is to make it easier for people to feel better and try to, for me, the biggest thing is to be able to start with my teams. And if my teams can feel it and understand it and live it, then I know we're doing something right. And, in a lot of ways, they are less equipped just based on how they grew up, the lack of educational opportunities that they've had. They're less equipped to deal with the stress and challenges of today's world. And so if we can be employers that can have the honor of serving people incredible food in a beautiful environment and at the same time empower our teams to feel better and take control of their lives, like to me, that's the dream.
Two-folded question. What have you learned about yourself since you started INDAY? And also, what are some of the business lessons that come to top of mind?
I think I had a very fixed mindset going into building a business, that things were either right or wrong, or we were doing a good job or a bad job. And, I was always waiting for kind of like an external validation to sort of prove to us that we were on the right path. And I've learned over the last 5 years to kind of let go of that to a certain extent and to feel much more guided by intuition and spiritual fulfillment and, knowing that there's always going to be these external kind of markers, but really the happiness comes from day to day and small wins of the things that I just, was describing to you. I feel a lot better about who I am and the work I do based on our ability to impact our teams. And that's something I didn't totally understand until I really got into it.
I'm so with you. And even though we're in completely different businesses, this is the exact place where I've recently arrived of, having chased so many external sources of validation and achieving some of them and realizing that, first of all, it just comes and goes. Second of all, if I continue sourcing my validation outside of myself, it's just going to be a never-ending chase. Even with Breakfast Criminals, like having created something that some people recognize and love and respect and think is so cool, I made it be something that when I walk into a room, I want people to see that and not me and where I am today. And I was holding on to it because, holding on to some of the good things and successes behind it. But that really stole my chance of just being present with what is and with what wants to come through me in this moment. And it's always changing. And you're right. It's so moment by moment. It's just this inquiry for me of how present can I be in every moment? How kind, how mindful, how compassionate with myself. And then as a result with others can I be? And ultimately that's really, and how much can I enjoy all the things that I've been building, instead of just looking for what's happening on the outside.
Well, I've always been amazed watching you from afar, just how much you do and how many things you have going on and the number of times that you followed your intuition and your wisdom and your instinct, and you've let that guide you, and it's been incredibly impressive to see what you've built. So I hope you do celebrate the small wins and the big wins.
Thank you.
If you can understand that the obstacles that you face are the journey, that is it. That's business. You'll be a lot happier with where you end up. And I think that that's extraordinarily important. I think we are in a society that, really, really values big wins and fast wins, and we've seen those. There's restaurants that have grown much faster than us that have also imploded much faster than us. And I think if you chase markers too quickly, you end up not building the foundation of a business. And I think that's been a big lesson for me, is to sort of understand that whether things are working or not working, these are just steps along a journey. And the most important thing to do is to focus on the day to day and to build teams and empower people. I would say that's been really important. I think putting our teams first has been a really helpful thing for us. I think there's businesses chase all kind of things. They'll chase profits. They'll chase customers. They'll chase growth. And we've really tried to build a more human-centric business. And it takes patience, and it takes money, and it takes time. But I feel like when you can build that is when you really have something that feels resilient, because we're entering into a very strange time. There's so much income inequality and disparity in this country. And, for us in our business, restaurant jobs are becoming harder and harder to hold on to. There's all sorts of hiring challenges that we're facing, and you're seeing these huge, huge companies like DoorDash and Caviar and Amazon who are willing to pay more than we can, and are stealing employees left and right, and making the restaurant business a really hard place for people to want to stay into. And so it's up for us as employers to figure out ways to make the human connection with our teams. And I think that's just so key to any people-based business going forward.
Wow, I really would like to believe, and I really choose in this moment to see a world where it's not just, where can I get bigger salary, where people don't have to feel like they're put in a corner like that, but where we can feel like we're on the right path, we're at home, we're supported, we're seen. And yeah, it's going to take letting go of some sexy short-term validation or success to really just stay on that path. And I don't think any of us have the roadmap for it, but just making that one human, mindful choice that's for highest good at a time is all we can do. And that's what I hear you are doing.
Yeah. And I think, there's some basic principles that are true about every person. People want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want to feel invalidated. And they want to be empowered to be the best version of themselves. And so COVID was hugely disruptive to our business, but as we try to rebuild the culture of our restaurants, we try to do it with that idea in mind. And, it's made all the difference just in terms of being able to feel really confident and appreciative of the work that we're able to do. I think our teams, we haven't had a lot of the same staffing challenges and issues because we take that kind of more human-centric approach with our teams.
What role do you think social media has played in INDAY's growth and evolution?
Initially it's something we paid a ton of attention to, and we were very active on social media, and I think it was a huge driver of our success. And I still think there are ways to tap into social media so that creates a platform that can be hugely beneficial. Connecting to our customers and giving them a channel that can work both ways, I think can be a really beautiful thing, but it's a difficult thing to manage right now. I think it's not a channel that we spend a ton of time investing in right now, frankly. But I think as the world starts coming back to normal,
if it ever does,
be an area where if it ever does, it'll be an area that we kind of re-engage with, probably in a little bit different way than we did before. But I know that it's still a very powerful outlet, and it's something that, when used in the right way, can further and sort of amplify the messaging that we care a lot about. And I think when we do get back on and do start spending more time and resources on it, we're going to use it as a way to tell more stories and be less promotional.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, as a business owner, service provider, it's so easy to look at our social media platforms and feel like we could have done something different. We could have been more active. Like a lot of people now are looking at TikTok and being like, oh, I should have gotten on that a year ago.
Yeah.
Or I look at myself and I'm like, I should have gotten on YouTube 10 years ago, not just, one video a year. But if I really invested my time, it would have been a different story. But also there's part of me that really knows and trusts that whatever needed to be taken care of and was meant to be taken care of and expressed was. And there's absolutely nothing that was missed. So I trust that for INDAY, whenever that time comes, and if it comes, and maybe by the time that time comes, Instagram won't exist. Who knows? If things are changing so quickly, YouTube and TikTok are huge right now. But I also wonder, you and I have had those conversations at INDAY of your own social media presence. You've expressed to me, I believe, that you were kind of dabbling and interested in having more public facing digital presence yourself. What are your thoughts on that today?
It's something that I've thought about for a long time, and I have to say, for better or worse, is not an avenue that I've really pursued. I just find, and maybe it's fear, or maybe it's like a uneasiness with being vulnerable. I've just found it like a very difficult thing for me to explore for myself, and so it's not something I've really pushed for or really spent time thinking about. And I keep saying that I know it'll be something that I want to do, and it's been always the last thing that I've really been able to like commit to and make a practice out of. And to your point, I don't know if what's holding me back is that it just maybe isn't the right time, or it's more that I haven't figured out a way to kind of break through the initial resistance of getting it done.
Right. Well, if you ever want to chat about that, you know where to find me. I'm happy to. That's what I do.
I do. I know. I need to. And I always push it to the bottom of the pile, but I really admire the people that can do it and that have found their voice and have done it authentically, and they do it in a way that speaks to their mission and has used it as a platform to connect with a community that is inspired. I think it's still a tremendously powerful thing to do.
Right, because I don't believe that every single person is meant to have a digital platform. A lot of the times, when it ends up being forced, it just doesn't really serve anyone, including the person doing it. But
sure.
I just also know that as a business owner, it can be such a beautiful pathway for people to feel your heart and connect more deeply with your offerings and your businesses.
Yeah. I mean, that's my big motivation for wanting to do it, honestly, is that I feel like there's only so much you can say through a corporate account, and people for good reason want to know the people behind the brands that they support. And everything we do at INDAY, we do with a very pure set of intentions, and we don't hide very much. And so just being able to provide a narrative and an overview, and if it helps create a little bit more awareness for what we believe to be better employee practices, I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor.
Don't wait until things get back to normal or until you are able to meditate twice a day again.
Okay. No, that's fair.
The process, I find that so many of us wait until like something is back.
Something feels perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something clicks in,
no,
and then
totally
I'll do
right.
it.
How do you find the motivation to start something that you've been kind of pushing off for a long time? Do you have any tricks?
I just allow myself to be really uncomfortable for as long as I need to be uncomfortable. And then I just rip off the Band-Aid. And what really helps me is just announcing it out in the world. Like this week, I received guidance to switch up all of my digital accounts, my podcast name. And I just went on my stories and I said, things will be changing. Go to this account. This will be shutting down. And kind of creating this external accountability and choosing a date. I looked when Mercury goes back direct and I'm like, okay, perfect. October 18th, just to set some external spaces to hold me accountable to actually get it done. Because otherwise it will just always remain a thought. And also just tuning into what feels expansive and exciting, really letting go of, I'm planning to archive all or most of my content on the former Breakfast Criminals Instagram. And that's like thousands of posts, a year, almost 10 years of work. Like it's really like my portfolio of so many things I've created, brands I've collaborated with, events I've done. And I'm hearing the whisper to let go of all of these things to create the space for what's meant to come in next instead of holding on to what it used to be. And so to me, that's what I find helps, just like really taking the leap.
It's that kind of fixed mindset that I was just describing. I think in a lot of ways in business, I've learned to let go and lean into something. But as it relates to my personal, I'm still kind of stuck in that fearful mode where I don't want to be bad at it. I don't want to expose myself or be too vulnerable. But I think you're right. I think it's about doing things that feel expansive and holding yourself accountable.
Some people are going to be pissed off no matter what you say. That's just the climate we're in. So might as
Sure,
well say something
sure.
that is true for you.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah. Vastu, this has been so wonderful. I feel like we covered so many different aspects and kind of layers and dimensions of you and what you do in the restaurants. Before we wrap up, is there anything I didn't ask you about that you feel called to share?
No, I just, to the point you just made, I think we are living in really divisive times, and I'm so appreciative that you take the time to sort of develop these ideas in this community of people that are trying to bring more balance and harmony and a more intuitive way to live. I think it's incredibly important, and now more than ever. And I'm thankful that you could connect me with your community, and I hope to see everyone in our restaurants someday soon.
Yeah, I'm creating content nourishment and you're creating food nourishment. So, everyone listening,
Okay.
if you have the opportunity, make sure you make your way to INDAY and also proper Indian, which I haven't made my way to.
Well, yeah, we'll have to send you some food next time you're in the
I
city.
must. Yes. Beautiful. Bashu, thank you so much. Have a beautiful weekend and have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone listening.